Alright, I'm going to do a relatively quick walkthrough of this weather app, and I'm going to have you guys make some changes to it, but I want to make sure you understand what's going on. And this is really an opportunity for you to play around with the panels a lot and understand some of the way that the layout works. And also look at how we can take something we previously worked on with weather and link it in with a couple of different things. We also have some input devices with buttons and message boxes, and you'll see that here. Now, one thing you'll notice, the colors are a little bit funky, but this is really to kind of highlight the border panel. So again, the border pane is our main pane that we use, and the top pane here you see is orange, and I'm using a left and a right. I'm not using a center or a bottom. So the left pane you can see here is purple, the right pane is yellow. I also have a message box that'll pop up when I want to do that. I can change the zip code and it will reload the weather for me with different weather there, and then I can exit when I click that. So let's take a quick look through a couple of things. Again, I commented the code quite a bit, so you should hopefully be able to get a sense of what's going on. Again, take some time to understand what's going on, and then you're going to need to make some modifications for your assignment. Alright, so the weather app, the main method here is just really not much more than a shell to kick off and go over to the weather pane organizer. So let me head over there. Should look somewhat familiar. So the opening class here, again, I'm creating my weather pane organizer, and I have my get root. You'll notice my root pane is a border pane right here. I put a background cadet blue. You don't actually see this anywhere because it's all covered up at one point. And now I also have a default weather, so this is actually getting weather for Columbia. Notice my get weather app passes latitude and longitude. Then I have three methods here: set daily, set current, and set top, and those kind of pick up my different pieces. Okay. Now one other thing, let me just go back real quick. You'll notice here I have set resizable to false. That is something that keeps the window from being resized. So I do set the width to be 1000 and the height to be 600, and those can't change. All right, so let's take a look at the top. Now if you remember, the top here had the city name as well as a change button and a exit button. So what I did to set that up was I used a horizontal box. So the horizontal box gets placed into the top section of the panel. And here's a little bit of organization I have for it, so that's where it gets the orange color from. I have a center alignment, and then I put an overall margin for that H box. Now that horizontal box basically allows me to lay out different panes or different nodes within that pane in a horizontal fashion, so they go left to right. So I have three in this case. I have a city label, I have an exit button, and I also have a change button here. Let me just put a comment. Okay. Now notice one thing that's new that we haven't seen and we're going to talk about in our other class a little bit. I'm using these lambdas for the exit button and the change button. What they do is they actually can call a method very easily without having to have a whole new action and a whole new class to call that method. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in our ADS class. Okay, but again, basically just setting up the buttons to do an action. In this case, it closes the program, and in this case, it calls the change city method. And then I add them to my top box there. So let's look at the change city method. Now notice here, the change city, the first thing it does is it creates a new message box. Now you might think that message box is something in JavaFX, but it's not. It's actually just a class that I created. Let's go take a look at that class. So this class is relatively simple. When I create a new one, I give it a zip code, and I have a default for Columbia. Then the main part of this is the show method, and then the only other thing I have down here is a get zip code method. But let's take a look at the show. So when I call the show method, I'm really essentially creating my application or my message box here. So I'm creating a whole new stage. I'm saying application modal, which basically says, okay, put this new box out there and wait for this box to be satisfied before you continue on. Okay, and the box title is going to be change city. And again, my main layout here is a VBox, and in my VBox I have two horizontal boxes. The first box holds the label and the text, and the second holds the two buttons. So I have my text label and my text field. I have my two buttons here, the OK button and the cancel button. And again, these are using lambdas. I have these buttons, and then they go into a HBox there, just like I put into an HBox for my zip code pieces. And then I put both of those HBoxes into a VBox, and I give it a little bit of style, and then I show it, and that's about it. And then I call my getZip to return it. So let me go back over to the weather pane. So I call that message box, I show it, and then I get the zip code. I'm then taking that zip code, and I'm using the Google Maps API in order to get latitude and longitude. I get the results back, and I'm reading a couple of different things from them. First is I'm getting the city name, and then I'm formatting the city name right here to have just the part that has city, comma, state. And so I'm taking a longer field, and you can see I'm taking the substring of it just to get that first part of it. So the comma would represent where the state starts, and I go 4 characters further to get that state. Then, again, going back to the results from my API poll, I can get the latitude and the longitude. And once I do that, I update the weather with a new poll, and I update my frame with recreating the different pieces. Okay, so now let's look at our current frame. So again, our current frame is actually a VBox. The top piece has the status image on it, and the bottom piece has the label and the temperature. Now notice the status is actually coming from a whole new field called status image, or a whole new class called status image. That's this field right here. Nothing to it really, other than I'm passing it a status that I'm getting from dark skies, and based on that I'm returning the different icon that I want. So I get the icon, I display it. I'm then going back to my weather data, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but I'm getting the current temperature and I'm displaying that. Okay, and again, HBoxes within VBoxes. Same thing for the set daily. I'm using a VBox for the main format of it, and setting up the VBox, or the main panel, and then I'm adding in these HBoxes. Now one thing to note, I actually start my loop at -1. My data starts at 0, but I'm starting at -1 so that I can basically say, okay, if I'm at -1, my label is what's going to go there. Otherwise, I'm actually going to get that day's forecast from my weather data. And again, relatively straightforward, creating an HBox, putting each piece in the HBox, and I add them all to the HBox here, and then I add that daily into my pane organizer right here. Okay. Now the only other thing I want to touch on is the get weather portion. This is similar to what we did before we had the JavaFX as far as pulling data. Now the one difference is, since I want to pass this back over, and I don't want to pass it back over as a JSON object, I actually am creating my own map, and you'll see I'm passing back a map and an object. The map has 2 entries, one is current and the other is daily, and then the object itself is also a map. And I'm doing this really just to kind of take the data that I need and send that back, and not send the whole thing back there. But again, you can go check it out and make changes as you need it. So that's basically it. And you'll see, again, as it runs, you'll see the HBox here with 3 entries. You see a VBox here, 1 entry here, and then an HBox with 2 entries there. And then again here, these are my VBoxes. So I have them all stacked up this way, and inside each VBox is a horizontal box stacked up this way here. And that's the basics of the app. And if you have any questions, go from there.